Welcome back to Sunday Night in America. Former President Donald Trump is facing a sweeping indictment in Georgia, alleging in essence he and others conspired to commit fraud as it relates to the 2020 election. You may recall Special Counsel Jack Smith left alleged co-conspirators unnamed in his indictment. Georgia prosecutors did not. Among the accused co-conspirators are Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and Mark Meadows. Joining us on these latest charges is the former Director of National Intelligence and former federal prosecutor John Lee Ratcliffe. Welcome, Director. Special Counsel Jack Smith charged conspiracy. The Atlanta DA charged RICO. I guess folks at home, you can include me in it. I mean, what's the difference? Two or more agreeing to violate the law. Why conspiracy versus RICO, or is it too complicated for me to understand?
No, it's not, Trey. Even you can understand this. Listen, a conspiracy is two or more people who plan to commit a crime, whereas the RICO statute requires two or more people to take overt acts in furtherance of a criminal enterprise. And federal prosecutors generally like RICO statutes because it allows them to go after, and was designed to go after, mafia kingpins and the heads of organizations who would avoid liability by simply ordering other people to do the illegal acts or dirty work for them. So in the current application, the DA down in Fulton County can argue, look, I don't have to prove that Donald Trump did all of these things so long as he was aware of and directed other people to take actions. The problem for her is this issue about proving that there was a criminal enterprise and the overt acts that she alleges support that. And that's where this thing really comes off the rails, so to speak. What she alleges in that, as far as overt acts, are what seem to me and many others to be clearly constitutionally, protected First Amendment freedom of speech rights that people have that she says are actually evidence of criminal activity in furtherance of a crime.
You know, there's a transcript from a phone call. There was a phone call between then President Trump and the Secretary of State in Georgia. And it seems to me that phone call is going to be both Exhibit A for the prosecution and the defense. So what do you make of that phone call? And do you see a potential defense actually in the transcript?
I do. So your viewers have only heard part of that transcript. It's the part of the call that's been played over and over again, where President Trump talks to the Secretary of State in Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, and says, Brad, I need you to find 11,870 votes. And the argument that the DA wants to make in this case is that that's proof of intent of the president's state of mind, that he wanted those votes to be stolen. The problem, Trey, is what no one has played is the rest of the transcript where the president says to that very same Secretary of State, I did not lose the state, Brad, and he says it in an angry voice. It's very clear to me that that is evidence of what his state of mind was and what his intent was at the time, which was, I need you to find me votes of an election that we both know that I won because I did not lose the state. So I think that's a tremendous legal hurdle that the DA is going to have in this case. The thing that the defense is going to have a field day with is the witnesses that they're going to call in this case to prove to prove the point are going to be Democratic legislators and the president, because it was a Democratic-controlled Congress and President Biden himself who signed into law an amendment to the Electoral Count Act of 1887 on the theory that there was ambiguity in the law and that the law needed to be cleaned up to make clear what the vice president's roles and responsibilities were in accounting electoral votes. So, for all of those reasons, it's really a difficult case for the prosecutor to make in this at the end of the day, one that I don't think will stand up to constitutional challenges on appeal if there is a verdict, but even convincing 12 jurors that the president had the state of mind to engage in a criminal enterprise to overturn, I just don't think it's going to happen.
State of mind, scienter, mens rea. The only people who think intent is easy to prove are people who've never had to do it. You and I did. It is harder than you might think, but John Lee Ratcliffe, thank you for explaining it, even where I could maybe follow it. And we look forward to having you back on. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Trey.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.